Today I bring you one of the most horrific crimes of 2026. This involves a certain Courtney Gartshore from Scotland. You'd have seen this case in the news quite recently. The disturbing events involving Courtney and her daughter, who was only 3 months old at the time. Well, these events, they took place in 2023. She's been on trial since, and only this week, so we're talking August 2026, she's finally been sentenced. And I'll touch on that in the video. Before that, I want to get into the case itself. I've got to stress though, this is an horrific crime with horrific details. So I'll tell you as much as I can. What I would suggest is after you watch this video, go away and read about the horrific detail if you want to. Because again, I do stress that. Only go away and read it if you want to, because it's horrific. And we are talking about a monster here. So it's 2023. Courtney Gartshore gives birth to her daughter, Dahlia-Rose. Now, at this time, it's said to be that Courtney had come off her mental health medications. So before pregnancy, before she knew that she was pregnant, she was on medication for her mental health. And as suggested, once she found out that she was pregnant, she came off this medication. Now again, this does not by all means excuse the horrific things she did. However, for the purpose of the case, for the purpose of the story, I think it's quite important to explain. And so pregnancy goes well. She gives birth to Dahlia-Rose. 3 months later is when the story, well, it really begins. On the night of this absolutely horrific tragedy, Courtney goes out with her friends and some close family relatives. It's said to be that they start by drinking indoors. So drinking at first Courtney's house, and then they move on to a friend's home. They then attend a pub, whereby it's stated at this time that there's some uncertainty. So there's some uncertainty as to whether Courtney's daughter, so Dahlia-Rose, would have been with Courtney at this time. Now it is suggested that Courtney had taken Dahlia-Rose with her to the friend's house and to the pub. But then other reports are suggesting that Dahlia-Rose didn't go with Courtney and potentially somebody was babysitting at Courtney's property. So again, there's some grey area about that. However, Courtney, she arrives home, and between the hours of 4 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning is when this horrific attack takes place. So again, it's important to stress, the reason, as I say, 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. is because, again, the courts have disclosed that the attack would have taken place between 4 and 9. They don't even know the exact time of when this attack would have taken place. So again, Courtney arrives home. It's said to be then that Courtney takes her hairdryer, so an electric hairdryer that you would plug into the plug, and she brutally attacks Dahlia-Rose using the heat. Now, I don't know about you, but it's horrific and it's disturbing. This is a parent, and Dahlia is Courtney's daughter. I have no idea, and sometimes I have no words for cases like this, because I'm not of the understanding of how a person can do this, let alone to somebody else but their own child. So after this horrific attack, it's said to be then that Courtney contacts the police, and she tells the police that she's found Dahlia-Rose unconscious and not breathing. When the police and emergency services arrive at this monster's house, they find that Dahlia-Rose as 18% burns, so to both her head and her chest. It's also stated that the burns are that significant that on parts of the body where the burns had occurred, well, those parts of the body would have deformed. So a couple of important things to point out. So once the emergency services and the police had arrived, and what this monster, Courtney, had done is she'd taken Dahlia from her bedroom onto the balcony of her flat. Again, why she would have done this, I don't know, and it's not really known. Maybe she was trying to cover her own tracks, but she did a terrible attempt at that, because in itself, again, through investigation, they had found the hairdryer plugged into the wall. So again, once emergency services and the police had arrived at Courtney's house, they'd found that the hairdryer was already plugged in and it was still turned on. Important police work, of course, was conducted. And again, I think it's important, although it's an horrendous detail, it's important to mention in the video that through investigation, DNA was actually found of Dahlia-Rose on the nozzle of the hairdryer that was used in this brutal attack. And so then Courtney has been arrested in 2023. We then move on. So between the years of 2023 to 2026, Courtney is released and a trial date is set. So again, for August 2026. Something to mention, which I think is absolutely horrendous, is that again, between this attack taking place in 2023 and the trial happening, so in August 26, Courtney, this monster, was allowed to travel on holiday to Turkey. So this horrendous, she's not a human, she's a monster, this horrendous monster has conducted a brutal attack on her own daughter, subsequently causing the death of her own daughter, and she's released and she's allowed to take a trip abroad to Turkey, notwithstanding that she knows at that point what she's done. I mean, she could have tried to flee, she could have tried to make a run for it. Regardless, personally, I think that was a bad decision. But now this brings us up then to her court appearance and trial that's happened this week. So this monster was convicted of culpable homicide. So this is by a Scottish judicial system, so a Scottish court system. So convicted again of culpable homicide. And what this essentially means, and this is the difference between culpable homicide and murder, the difference is that they found that there was no evidence of intent to kill, so intent to murder. Subsequently, being convicted of culpable homicide, she has been sentenced to 6 years in prison. Personally, I think that this is a tragic story of such a small individual that would have been so defenseless. And this monster, again, notwithstanding the mental health circumstances, has committed such an horrific ordeal, an horrific attack on her own daughter. It's absolutely horrendous, and I think the sentencing in itself is absolutely shocking. But please let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of this case? But more importantly, what do you think about the sentencing?